true stories
that make us say,
wow, God.
Wow, God.
Wow, God.
And so within about 2 hours, I went from a director with a very bright future to a director with no future.
And one of my employees called me into my office, said, Dave, I need to talk to you. I said, yeah, sure. He said, yeah, I just got to tell you that you're really a prideful man.
The Lord let me dangle my legs over the edge of something that could have been very bad. I was just so humiliated.
Hi, I'm Rob Vischer. On Father's Day this year, I stopped by Kroger after church to buy some steaks to grill for my family. Well, really for me. As I walked up to the checkout, I noticed a bunch of rainbow balloons in the flower section. Printed on the balloons were messages like, Happy Pride, Celebrating Pride, etc. I rolled my eyes and bought my steaks, and I honestly was a little bit annoyed and sad. But not just for the reasons you might assume. Over the last couple of years, God has opposed me. I used to explain it to my wife as, it seems like God thwarts everything I do. For example, I lost a podcast. I lost my job. None of my songs have become hits. I got injured in rec basketball multiple times. My wife threatened to leave me, and I now work as a handyman part-time, something I swore I'd never do. And that's just a fraction of the list. When telling my story to friends, I often say, God keeps kneecapping my pride. And the evidence for how unpleasant that process is can be found within the statement. When I say kneecapping, I'm loosely comparing God's tactics to that of a cruel mob boss. As I researched for this episode, though, I was reminded of why God has opposed me. James 4:6 says, God opposes the proud. When I see anything that celebrates pride now, no matter what kind of pride, I get sad for the people celebrating because I know God will oppose them like he's opposed me. In our first story, director Dallas Jenkins experiences a career-crushing failure that helps him see why God was opposing him.
My goals were I wanted to be a director who won an Academy Award and made a movie that really impacted culture on a mass scale. So I ended up making a short film for our church's Christmas Eve service, and it had great impact. The church loved it. Long story short, that short film got in the hands of one of the biggest producers in Hollywood, who's made hugely successful horror films. And he wanted to dip his toes into the faith-based waters. And so he saw that short film, and he absolutely loved it and wanted to make a movie with me. Blumhouse Productions wanted to be in business with me. They ended up partnering with WWE, yes, the wrestling company. And I had gotten, in many ways, I had achieved the goal that I had set for myself, which was to make it in Hollywood and to be working with big-time producers. And I got a chance. We got a good cast. We got a good crew. Made the film. The film ended up testing higher than any movie that either one of those companies had done. I mean, they did a test in Orange County with an audience that absolutely loved the film. And they started talking about developing other projects with me. And Walden Media, which is a huge Hollywood production company, did Chronicles of Narnia. They saw the movie and loved it, wanted to be involved, wanted to hear my pitches for future films. Universal Studios, a major studio, was going to distribute the film. So, I mean, it was set. I mean, I had achieved many of the goals. Now, of course, the film still had to come out, so that was still to come. But I was like, I was a director with a very bright future. So my confidence was really high. And then January 20th was the date that it released. And that was Inauguration Day for the presidency. This was in January 20th, 2017. And that's when the movie came out. And that's when my world was changed forever. When the box office numbers come out, you can tell within a couple hours of what it's going to be like that weekend. And so, we got the numbers early afternoon, and it was very clear immediately that the movie was a total bomb financially. The numbers were lower than even their lowest projections. And even if things turned around a little bit that weekend, it was clear that it wasn't going to do what any of them expected it to do. And so within about 2 hours, I went from a director with a very bright future to a director with no future, or at least an uncertain future. And all of those companies that were involved within, hours and days made it clear that they weren't going to do this again. They went back to doing what they did best, which was horror films and wrestling and, big studio projects. I was at a low point. As low as I've ever been, just going, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm not supposed to even make movies. Maybe I've been missing the point all along. And then God put it on my wife's heart as explicitly as though he had said it audibly, the story of the feeding of the 5,000. And we didn't know why, but we looked into that scripture. God, the Son, had them gather the fish and the loaves. And then when they found it, he multiplied it and he had them distribute it. And we thought, oh, that's interesting that he still used the disciples in this miracle that he was doing. And that made us realize maybe God has been in this, and maybe he's brought us to this place where he's about to do a big miracle. And so we were like, maybe the box office numbers are going to magically turn around this weekend, and we're going to be able to tell these godless agnostics in Hollywood just what God is all about. And God's going to do something extraordinary with the box office numbers. And that didn't happen. So we were just confused. We didn't know why this story, what does it have to do with us? What's the miracle? What's God showing us? Well, that night at 4:00 in the morning, I was analyzing everything that had gone wrong, and I was doing a 15-page memo. And at 4:00 in the morning, a Facebook message popped up on my computer. It just said, remember, your job is not to feed the 5,000. It's only to provide the loaves and fish. And it's in that moment, I knew, like, it's like everything came together. Over the last 10 years of my life, over the last 10 hours of my life, over the last months of doing the project, it was like God crystallized everything. And I said to this guy, Alex, I said, may I ask you why you told me this? And he said, oh, it wasn't me. God told me to tell you this. And it was like, I genuinely realized in that moment, I mean, it all came together immediately, where it's like, it's not my job to worry about the results. It's not my job to have expectations and goals for my life and my career. It's only my job to make sure that whatever loaves and fish that I bring to God, that they're as good and healthy as they can be. And that if he chooses to multiply them, that they're going to be good and healthy. And if he doesn't choose to multiply them, that's not my job to worry about. I used to watch the Academy Awards every time, picturing myself up there and imagining it and wanting it. I couldn't care less now. I don't care about Hollywood success. I don't care about waiting for Hollywood to lower its golden scepter to allow me into their hallowed halls. And I think that's what led to me ultimately doing The Chosen and doing The Chosen in the way that it's been done.
Once Dallas let go of his big dreams, aka pride, God led him to make something that truly impacted people. And I know it did, because a couple of years ago, my wife and I were praying for a brother of one of my best friends to turn his life over to Jesus. That prayer was answered. Both he and his wife decided to give their lives to Christ a couple of months after they started watching, you guessed it, The Chosen. In our next story, like Dallas, Dave didn't think of himself as a prideful guy. After all, he gave away a ton of money. But for Dave, it wasn't a career-crushing failure that God used to show him his pride. It was an employee who cared enough to say something to him, even when it meant the employee could lose his job.
So I used to think that anyone who is not in ministry was a second-class Christian and lesser than me. I was superior to them spiritually. So I was teaching English down in Mexico. I was a missionary for a year. While I was there, I said, I need something to carry my books in. And I had this bag in my head. I was like, yeah, what would Indiana Jones carry? And so I wanted something like, really cool like that. So a leather bag. So I found a guy making bags. And so I sketched it out for him. I said, I want my grandkids to fight over this when I'm dead. So he put it together. And then when I got it, I roughed it up a little and softened it and whatnot. And everywhere I went, people tapped me on the shoulder 4 or 5 times a day. Where could I get a bag like that? So I went back, had some more made. This father and son would send bags up to me from southern Mexico. And I'd go to the bus station and take them over to El Paso and sell them on eBay. And yeah, so I was going crazy on eBay. And I thought these bags, I could sell the bags and I could support myself in ministry. I spoke Spanish now, all that sort of thing. I wouldn't have to go anywhere. I wouldn't have to have a boss. But then in 2006, I just got too busy with the bags. I felt guilty about it because I wasn't in ministry. Yeah, it was pretty lame. The business was really taking off. And we had so much money. And I was like, what do I do with all this money? So I started giving it away as fast as we could. And so we were giving it away, trying to maintain that spiritual look. And talking a lot about it. And just to confirm to everyone, I was doing it for my image. So I was at work in April 2018, and one of my believing employees called me into my office, said, Dave, I need to talk to you. I said, yeah, sure. He said, yeah, I just got to tell you that you're really a prideful man. And I go, Oh, man, that's big of you, man. Thank you for sharing that. That must have been difficult. Like, in what ways am I prideful? Because I don't want to be, because God resists prideful people. And he goes, yeah, just in general. I told my wife that night that he said that. She goes, oh, whatever. You're a really humble man. She goes, you don't brag about everything and all that stuff. You're a humble man. I said, yeah, I thought so too. So I Googled signs of pride list. I went through all of the lists and I compiled them all. I went home. I filed a few of them, went home and I said, hey, honey, look, Gene was right. Here's my pride. I didn't know this was what pride was. And so she looked at me as I read a few of these off and she goes, you are prideful. And I was like, I need you to pray for me that I won't be prideful. When it starts surfacing, because we all are prideful all of our lives, when it starts to surface, that I'll recognize it and then God will help me not to be prideful in that area. And she said, okay, I'll pray for you. So anyway, that was a big, huge change. But one of those is spiritual pride. And it had a big list of what spiritual pride looks like. All these different lists, I compiled like 40 or 50 lists, put them all in one spot. My marriage changed night and day. It was great. God was helping me to understand that I can do business and that God is just as pleased with people in business as he is in ministry, as long as our intention is that he gets glory.
If you want a good article on pride, go to saddlebackleather.com/pride. It's much different than what you might find on, say, target.com/pride. The Saddleback Leather article has already had a great effect on many men, including me and the producer of this show, Mike Shermack. Before he put that article on his website, though, Dave was confronted about his pride by an employee he could have fired. But in our next story, Zach's pride leads him to lie, which gets him fired.
Soccer was this huge part of my life. It's still a huge part of my life. It was how I ended up at Asbury. I was a volunteer coach. I love soccer, but I was never like the best player. But I wanted to be involved with soccer in college. So a lot of my friends were playing on the team. Simply ended up I was not good enough to play there. I ended up being the laundry boy of the soccer team, which was a quite frustrating, humbling thing at first. And there's so many stories, but God really met me through that. And I really fell in love with the idea of serving people that I love. And when you're like wishing you were playing soccer, but now you're like scrubbing their underwear, and just finding myself in a season of praying over jerseys and scrubbing shorts. But the Lord really taught me about humility and service. And I graduated and jumped into ministry. And the first church I was at was this big, beautiful church. I had never been in a community that cared about evangelism as much as I did. And I had never been in a community that saw so many people come to Christ. It was just unbelievable. But that ended up me getting so overwhelmed and a lot of my brokenness coming to the surface, and me getting fired from that church in 2016. And how I kind of put it is the Lord let me dangle my legs over the edge of something that could have been very bad, you know? And now I look back at it and I'm like, so grateful I got caught. My wife had been praying that I would get caught. And in that season, I found myself working at a donut shop because I got fired. And the transition for me was very hard because of my pride. I used to preach and be on stages, and now I'm making lattes. What am I doing? And that was this other crucible moment. Kind of like, oh, I wish I was playing soccer. I'm scrubbing their shorts. For me, I'm like, I used to sit in that chair and pastor students. Now I'm making donuts for students. But the Lord met me there as well. The donut shop was just maybe 3 blocks from the church. And I, when I was working at the church, would be at that donut coffee shop all the time, meeting people. So I started working there. And then some of the teams I used to belong to, or some of the people I would work for or work with, would go there, and there was just this tension, and really because I was just so humiliated. And there was a specific moment that this manager asked me to clean the windows of the donut shop. And it was during a time where the specific team that I used to belong to was meeting in the donut shop. And I remember just wanting to die, like wanting to crawl out of my skin, I just started crying. And I remember looking at the manager and being like, can I please wait? I'll do anything. And, they don't care. So I remember cleaning some windows. I remember I cleaned the first window. I'm just like terrified, upset. Second window, I'm terrified, upset. Third window, I'm terrified, upset. Fourth window, starting getting soft and desperate for the Lord. And like the fifth window, I turned the corner and I'm starting to feel ministered to by Jesus that, Zach, like, I'm out here just as much as I'm with them talking about ministry. Like, what are you thinking? And really, as I continued to clean these windows, the more and more the Lord had broken something in me of my pride that, he didn't want to humiliate me. He wanted to humble me. And those are two very different things. I think we misunderstand that often. We think we have to be humiliated to be humbled. But Jesus isn't in the business of humiliating us. But he is a humble Jesus that we can go there with him. So, yeah, that season really prompted my next season of ministry, where I completed my restoration process and went through counseling and all this stuff that then the denomination asked if I would plant a church. And I did that and planted and pastored that church for multiple years. That was a really sweet season.
During his humiliating time at a donut shop, Zach submitted to a restoration process in his denomination when he could have left that denomination entirely and made a fresh start. He went on to plant a church, but that's not really the end of his story. On February 8, 2023, he spoke in a university chapel. After the message, he texted his wife about the sermon. "Hey, I laid a stinker," he texted. "I'll be home soon for a nap." He thought his sermon was awful, but he noticed a few students stayed for worship. Throughout the day, more students trickled in to worship. God used his sermon to be the catalyst for what some people now know as the Asbury Outpouring, a move of God that over 100,000 people attended over the course of 16 days. Dallas dreamed big dreams of Academy Awards and affecting culture. Dave wanted to do ministry, and Zach wanted to impress others with his stories. None of these guys celebrated Pride with rainbow-colored balloons or parades, but under all of these seemingly good things laid a hidden foundation of pride. And God didn't celebrate it or excuse it. He opposed it. I'm reading through saddlebackleather.com/pride right now. Let me read you a snippet. God had been resisting me. It was like his palm was firmly planted in my forehead as I walked through life, and it was really uncomfortable, and it was constant. He doesn't body slam the proud, he just resists them. But he gives grace, free gifts, what we didn't deserve or earn, unmerited favor to the humble. Could it be that God is resisting you in your relationships or business or church or whatever area of your life? When I read that, I know for me, the answer is definitely yes. And even though God has opposed me, it's not because he's a mob boss. It's because he's good. With all my pride, success would have ruined me. Read saddlebackleather.com/pride and see if maybe God is opposing you. Maybe you already have a story of God opposing your pride. If you don't, you'll probably get a story very soon. And we'd love to hear it when you do. Please send us your story at myfaithpodcast.com. We can't wait to hear the story of God's opposition that makes you say, "Wow, God." And when I say wow, God, I mean the one true living God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's the one who makes my heart say,
Wow, God.
Wow, God.
Wow, God.
My wow God story.
I wanted to share a wow God moment.
That's my wow God story. Praise God.
And I'm so thankful to God for this wow God moment.
So, thank you, God.